everybody. I want to personally welcome you to this episode, a very special episode of Brains with Brian. And this is a monthly series where we'll be talking to world experts in the field of neurology, research, rehabilitation, and music, and discussing all things from digital therapeutics to rehabilitation and music and neuroscience. And each month we feature a new expert who will provide valuable insight into these important topics. Our goal is to help make cutting-edge research and insights more accessible to people, told by the individuals who are leading the charge in their respective areas. The show is hosted by me, Brian Harris, the co-founder and CEO of MedRhythms, a digital therapeutics company focusing at the intersection of neuroscience, technology, and music to build interventions that transform the lives of those living with neurologic injury or disease. If you'd like to learn more about MedRhythms, please visit our website at www.medrhythms.com. And I hope that you'll find today's episode interesting, meaningful, and compelling, and I believe that you will. And today's a special episode as we are live from Chicago, Illinois, the very first live streamed episode of Brains with Brian at the American Congress of Rehabilitation Medicine. And it's an honor for me to have with me Jon Lindberg, who is the CEO of ACRM. And just to give some context, he's the CEO of the American Congress of Rehabilitation Medicine, a 100-year-old medical association with 85,000 members. Prior to ACRM, he has extensive experience in leading international nonprofits. And since joining ACRM in the summer of 2009, Jon has grown the membership of ACRM from just 170 to over 17,000 individual members, going from 0 to 100 plus institutional memberships, and meeting registrations going from under 300 to over 3,000 at this annual meeting, and annual investments growing in the mission of ACRM to nearly $1 million annually. And that's a very brief introduction and bio for Jon, who I could go on for much longer for, but I have agreed to keep it brief. So Jon, it's an honor to have you here today. Thank you so much for taking the time, especially on the week of ACRM, and I know that your schedule is packed, so thanks for being here today.
It's my great pleasure, and it's my great honor. We've gone back now about a decade,
yes,
since you were first involved in ACRM and yes, being involved in Spalding and your own incredible background, such an incredible organization. And so I'm thrilled to be here and happy to help in any way.
Well, thank you so much. And maybe just to get started, can you tell us a bit more about ACRM and ACRM's mission?
So ACRM is a little bit complicated. It's a little bit different. A lot of organizations, a lot of medical nonprofits are organized by either the diagnostic or by the discipline. And so ACRM is team science. So it's the diagnostics are traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury, stroke, neurodegenerative disease, cancer, chronic pain, limb loss, study of neuroplasticity. So it's sort of all across the spectrum of serious diagnostics. And then it's every job discipline of anybody who would be involved in the rehab team. So whether it's the physiatrist or the neurologist or the rehab nurse, speech language pathologist, occupational therapist, on and on and on, everyone here is welcome. And it's a lot of research focus within ACRM, but we're also trying to bring research into practice faster. And so we have some clinicians who are interested to attend our meetings as well and become members.
It seems like quite an interdisciplinary group.
It is.
Right? Across to really promote collaboration, right, across that, which is so important. Can you tell us about your role at ACRM? And there's a president of ACRM and a CEO, and what does your job entail?
So to be clear, my boss is Dr. Pam Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
She's with Cedars-Sinai. She is incredibly well-credentialed. And she is the president of ACRM, which is a term that goes back to its founding 100 years ago. But it's really, she is the volunteer chairperson of the board. Mm-hmm. So she is the ultimate leader of the organization. She is my boss, and very proud to be working for Dr. Roberts, and very happy to be working for ACRM. It's a great honor, great privilege.
And you talk about, a bit about that history of a 100-year-old organization. Can you tell us even, high level a little bit about that history of the organization and sort of how it's evolved over the years? And, it seems like especially the last 10 years since, we've known each other, things have really improved a lot and increased a lot. But what does that evolution look like?
So we're in the process now of putting together a timeline of the past 100 years. ACRM actually started out, and I'm told it makes sense in the rehab standpoint, but it started out as a radiological organization 100 years ago. So we're going to be rolling out a great production next year for the whole history. But 20, 30 years ago, it had different segments, subsegments, and those organizations broke off. One of the organizations that broke off was rehab nurses. Another one that broke off was physiatrist organization. And we try to be Switzerland with everybody. We don't want any trouble with any organization. We just stay in our lane and try to stay focused on rehabilitation research. But so many great organizations out there, we try to partner with them in every way we can. When I came on board about 13 years ago, the primary focus of ACRM on the association side was brain injury. So anything to do with brain injury, and absolutely the world leaders in brain injury research. I mean, the best of the best. We also have a medical journal that's 103 years old, the Archives of Physical Medicine Rehabilitation, highly rated journal, high impact factor, tremendous number of citations, 3.3 million downloads a year, about one every 10 or 11 seconds. So just, phenomenal institutional knowledge going back 103 years. That medical journal really became the foundation for the strategic plan, because all of the different diagnostics and all the different disciplines are contributing to that journal. So we said, this board met and had a strategic planning meeting. Said, why don't we try to match what we're doing in rehab and the archives to what we want to do in ACRM? And so that's really what sparked tremendous growth, adding more diagnostics, adding more disciplines, and trying to do it in a way where we're not stepping on any toes. Excuse me.
Yeah, and it's interesting because from my perspective, in being involved with a number of different organizations and even just different conferences, ACRM feels different. And it is very much this collaborative environment that doesn't step on toes of other organizations, but really tries to bring people of all backgrounds, research, clinicians, executives into the same room for an opportunity to collaborate across the board. And I think that's one of the things that makes ACRM such a special organization. We're here at the annual conference, which is perhaps the biggest event that ACRM does in the year. What's the conference specifically all about?
So here is the thing that really bewildered me when I started early on in ACRM, is that it takes on average about 30 years for research to make it into practice. There are some good and understandable reasons for that, because once the research is done, it has to go through government approval. It has to be translated to different languages, no matter where it came from in the world, et cetera, et cetera. But ACRM would really want to try to shorten that by an order of magnitude. Instead of it be 30 years, we'd like it to be 3 years. And so there are a lot of things that we're doing on that front. We're trying to get the medical journal more open access. Open access publishing means from the second it's published, it's open and available to the world for free. We introduced in 2020 a new free membership category, so we provide that access to the world for free. And we try to keep the registration costs as low as possible, so it can be as accessible as possible to anyone around the world, so that we can get that research out to the world faster. So that's one of the big impetuses of the organization. That's something that I'm very passionate about. We really, so many people suffering with interventions that are available where they can be treated immediately, but it's taking 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, it's really interesting to even think about that point. And I remember hearing that statistic of the 30 years from the time that we discover something in healthcare until we begin to implement it. I mean, that's not widespread implementation. On average is 30 years. And I heard that actually from a keynote speaker, I believe when ACRM was in Toronto
that's exactly
a while back. And that stuck with me. And also, I mean, relevant to the work that we do in MedRhythms, what stuck to me about that is, as a music therapist trained, I'm trained in what's called neurologic music therapy, which is a new specialization within the field of music therapy that's purely focused on neuroscience research and applying music through the lens of neuroscience. As we started to look at that field, the very first neurologic music therapists were trained around the year 2000. So we're about, 20 years, 22 years. And what we've really seen is that over the past 20 years, been a lot of research, but now is really where we're starting to see some of that growth of implementation of the research that we've known about for the last 3 decades. We've known that music can work, but it has never been applied. And we're seeing that same sort of trajectory of the rest of healthcare in our own field. And so that really spoke to me a lot. And it's also interesting for me to think about even ACRM's role in specifically our field too, because when we started the arts and neuroscience group. So Dr. Ron Hirschberg, who was on this show a couple of months ago, and I started this group, arts and neuroscience group at ACRM. I believe I was the only music therapist that came to the conference, and I think I was the first music therapist to give a presentation here. And I was sitting at our networking group meeting yesterday for arts and neuroscience, and there were music therapists and dancers and just so many people in the arts here at this conference, and that would never happen without the support of the organization. And so that's really, I think, a pretty unique perspective that I have from the inside of seeing the impact of an organization like ACRM can have really tangibly in the world. So,
well, I have so much to admire with you, Brian, and Dr. Ron Hirschberg just absolutely blew my mind when I started to hear what you were working on. You know, my sister works as an art therapist, and long ago, she started to explain to me how art therapy can really be healing. And at first, it sounded a little bit, you know, not like real science, but we're finding more and more it is based on real science. And so I remember this incredible presentation, I think in Chicago, 2016, with you and Dr. Hirschberg, and Ben Folds was gracious enough to come in, yes. and the whole demonstration, and this very simple idea, this very simple concept of accessing the musical side of the brain, the creative side of the brain, can give better flow of speech, or can give better flow of walking across the room. When somebody tries to dance across the room as opposed to walk across the room, they get better flow. And I can't tell you, I've told that story to at least 100 people who were struggling with that, and they're finding immediate with me just being a layperson, not having any scientific background, but the energy and knowledge that you've infused into the community and into the world, you and Dr. Hirschberg, great work at Spalding. I mean, it's mind blowing to me. It's really fantastic. And what you're doing with your new company, MedRhythm, I mean, I don't want, I shouldn't say this in public, but I want to be an investor. I mean, it's just, I wish you could tell me a little bit more. I've heard the thumbnail sketch, but I don't have the scientific knowledge. But if I could hear the layperson's explanation, that would be fantastic.
Well, it's interesting, John, because I think there's a lot of there's a lot of similarities as we think about, which I would assume why you got into this work to begin with. I mean, to lead an organization that's in healthcare, it's because you want to make an impact, right? You want to help people, and that's really been the theme and the root of MedRhythm's foundation, was trying to figure out how do we help more people. Fundamentally, that comes through advocacy, that comes through clinical care. We also fundamentally believe that comes through building organization and teams to really push this forward. And so, we started, as you mentioned, with the work we were doing at Spalding and with Ron Hirschberg, actually treating patients with live music interventions in all these ways of helping them improve walking or speech and language or cognition after brain injuries, primarily traumatic brain injuries or strokes. And we were seeing such great outcomes. We now had the neuroscience to say how this was possible and how we could replicate it. But there just simply weren't enough ways for us to scale or to reach more people. And so really rooted in that question of access, we started asking ourselves, well, how can we reach more people? We first started by actually building a therapy team and hiring other music therapists to treat patients. And we're working with Spalding now, and also we're working with Burke Rehabilitation just outside of New York City. Started doing in-home care and even teletherapy, but also quickly realized in the current state of healthcare that we weren't going to be able to make the impact that we dreamed of, that we had a vision for, that we believed that we could. And so the answer becomes, well, how do you reach more people? And the answer to that was technology for us. And so now we've started to build what we call digital therapeutics. And these are hardware and software products that essentially can think like a therapist. We're focused first specifically on walking. So I like to think about, the exercise that Ben Folds did back in 2016 and having somebody walk across the stage and walk to the rhythm and then trying not to walk with the rhythm. It's nearly impossible. But there's a very profound impact of rhythm on the human brain. And so we're essentially trying to, put Ben into a box and send it to people's homes such that people can get access to that care. And in the same way, it's important to us. I think a lot of people may have that reaction when they start thinking about the arts, when they start thinking about music, that it might be a little fluffy, right? It may not be rooted in science. And so we're really trying to change that narrative along the way to say, no, it's rooted in hard neuroscience. There's impacts on function, there's impact on neuroplasticity. And as such, which is why we're building our products to actually go through rigorous clinical trials like a drug would, to be regulated by the FDA, to be prescription, though our drug is music. And so, I think there's actually some very similarities about motivations and why we think about our organizations quite similarly. Yeah,
it's really inspiring to me because I haven't met anybody in rehab who didn't have a personal connection, a personal passion to want to improve lives, which the board had decided would be the theme of ACRM, our tagline, to improve lives. And so to see that happening at the business level, at the corporate level, with significant financial investment, the idea of trying to come out with a product that, yes, it will make a profit, but at the same time is going to make such a significant quality of life improvement in somebody. And I thought what was great about that Ben Folds presentation was that it gave instant credibility. I didn't need to see a scientific report. I didn't need to see a chart or a graph. I didn't need to see something from the FDA. I was seeing it live in person on the stage with a credible person suffering from Parkinson's. I mean, it was just mind blowing.
Yes.
And people watching this won't even believe it unless they have a personal connection and they try it.
Right.
And so we hope that this will get people to come to your website, get people to help you launch your product in ways we couldn't even imagine, so that we can get that knowledge to the world faster. That's getting the research to the world faster. And so you're a big part of that. And corporate America and venture capital investment, I see is playing a bigger role. And that's really inspirational to me.
Well, I appreciate, and I think that's an important point that I've always appreciated about ACRM and throughout this process too, John, which is thinking about, when you talk about interdisciplinary collaboration, right? Even when we say that term, especially as clinicians ourselves, we think a lot about all of the different disciplines in healthcare, right? It's the therapists, it's the researchers, it's the clinicians. But I think, as we've always thought about making a big impact in revolutionizing healthcare, and the business of healthcare can be difficult when you start thinking about providers and payers and regulators and these types of things. There's a lot to being successful and being able to change healthcare, which requires a multifaceted solution. And so that the collaboration is not just within healthcare, but also sort of across healthcare of the different stakeholders, including industry collaborators. And I think that that's going to be a really important part of the future of rehabilitation, is being able to take these, the Spaldings of the world and Harvard Medical School and the large academic medical centers and the world-class leaders that are driving research and clinical care there, but also being able to collaborate with industry as well is what's going to be needed to really, I think, help us all rise and really make the impact that we all want to.
And I think that was really one of the many geniuses of the Affordable Care Act, because it really pushes team science. It really focuses on outcomes. And you can't, in a complicated spinal cord injury, complicated traumatic brain injury, stroke, it's not just one person who can do all the treatment. And the great solution and the best care comes from the team. There's no one person that can win the Super Bowl. And it seems that the Affordable Care Act built this into the infrastructure, a forcing of organizations to work together, of multiple diagnostics to work together. And I see it just accelerating the improvements in the outcomes. I'm not referencing a particular report, but that's the vibe that I feel. And so I think you're part of that as well.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And as I think about, from your perspective of where you sit in your role, what do you think are some of the biggest gaps in rehabilitation right now?
Well, I mean, there are so many interventions that are available to people in the world. And please don't quote me on these. These are just the story that I tell. One of your own at Spalding, Dr. Joe Giacino, he talks about how one of the interventions to bring somebody out of a coma is to give them an Ambien. So it doesn't make intuitive sense to do that, but in certain cases, it has this tremendous outcome. So how many people are there around the world right now, out of the 8 billion people, who are in a coma that would benefit by being brought out of that coma? Is it 1,000 people? Is it 10,000 people? Yes, they just don't know that intervention. And I hear the story from Dr. Doug Katz. He's a past president neurologist, past president of ACRM, and he'll tell the story about how somebody has been on vertigo medication for 10, 20 years. And really all they needed was a simple Epley maneuver, where you sort of roll to one side, lay on your back, roll to one side, roll to another side, roll to another side. The whole thing takes about 2 minutes. It releases that little crystalline in the ear, and the vertigo goes away completely. And oddly enough, I had that happen to me about 5 years ago.
Wow.
And I was really panicked. And so, but I was able to get online, watch a little 2-minute video for free, treat myself basically.
Right.
And so, this is a whole world of people suffering every day with very simple interventions. Many of the interventions are complicated and take investment and time and training. It's not simple. It might take years of work and effort to make small strides, small improvements. But I think this is the huge opportunity for our world at this time to get the medical research, not just rehabilitation research, but all the medical research out to the world faster. And I think the systems are making that happen. You see that through open access and publishing.
Right.
And I think the paid membership model with associations is going away. It'll be more adopting models of what we see with social media. I'm happy to go out and use Google for free.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fair trade for them to be able to advertise back to me. Same with Facebook, same with all these organizations. I think that's a fair deal. That's a fair trade. I'm getting a great service. It's built on billions of dollars of infrastructure.
Yes.
And I get to use the service for free. So we were morphing to that. And it was within the pandemic that the board of directors, specifically the executive finance committee, made a decision to invest in we went from sort of the most basic entry-level membership system to the most advanced membership system. Imus in the cloud, I'll give them a little plug. And it made a world of difference. It was so hard mechanically for people to access through that. Once we opened that door, then our total membership grew within about 2 years to 85,000 just overnight. We've had some duplicates in there that we've sorted out over time through buying of more data to confirm those duplicates. But the demand is out there, the interest is out there. People are really hungry for this. And I'll say one other thing: it's the empowered consumer. When I was growing up, we go to the doctor has all the information, the doctor has the medical information, and we would just listen to whatever the doctor said and follow those instructions. And that is, if we had questions or anxiety, we were stuck. We were going to go to medical school and spend 8 or 10 years of our life to get the answer. If you're lucky, you had a family friend or somebody in the neighborhood you could ask medical questions to. But now we have Google and we have all this information for free, and YouTube, these great tools where people will post their talks about what's happening. And that's what I hope, is that people will listen to your podcasts and get that information as you're interviewing the experts, people who are much brighter than me, and people who are going to be much more entertained and much better served than me. But I'm passionate about the business side and the process side of trying to get that out there.
Which is an important side of this. And I like to keep coming back to that because, I think that as you think about dissemination, access, advocacy, and all of those things that you're talking about, I mean, there has to be a business side of that to really make impact. Right. And so I think it's important that we have, very smart people like you in charge of organizations like this to really be an important part of that dissemination. And that actually leads me to, I think, to wrap up here, a final question, which is, what's the vision for ACRM specifically over the years to come? Like, what's your goal or your vision for the organization?
So, I don't want this to come across as hubris, and people sort of give a little chuckle when I say it, but I want ACRM to be the greatest healthcare association that it can be in this space, to reach its potential. The goal is perfection. That doesn't mean ACRM will be the only healthcare association in the world. Right. Part of being the greatest is we say we want to be Switzerland. We want to be neutral to everyone. We swim in our lane. We want to work cooperatively with all the other associations so that we're working as a team with the institutions, the whole system in a cooperative, helpful way, trying to offer that feedback. And so we don't know where those limits are, but we have the sense that they're a lot greater than when we're at now.
Amazing. Well, Jon, thank you so much, for being here, but more importantly, for the work that you're doing at ACRM and the support that you provide everybody across the organization and what you've done to grow this and thus the impact of the organization. And so it's an honor for me to be here with you today. And I thank you very much for taking the time.
It's my great pleasure. And your work is a noble work, and you're going to really improve millions of lives by the time you're done with your career, which I know is going to be decades and decades from now. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jon. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in today, and keep an eye out for our next episode, which will be in December. And our next guest will be announced very soon, but I'm very excited about that one. And we'll be streaming live that as well. And as a reminder, if you'd like to watch this episode again, or would like to learn about MedRhythms, anything else about MedRhythms, you can check out our website at www.medrhythms.com.
Don't forget the H.
Yeah, don't forget the H. Whoever decided to name the company using the word rhythm, which is perhaps the hardest word to spell in the English language, somebody should talk to that person. It was me. So thanks for pointing that out. So check it out, MEDRHYTHMS. But thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you all soon.